Sorry. Good morning. How are you? Great. Have a great weekend? Yeah, I did too. I'm going to give hats off to my son's soccer. They won the first place championship over the weekend, so I'm thrilled. So as I'm thrilled, you're thrilled. Good morning. I'm Lisa Silverman. I'm the executive officer for the Office of Public School Construction. And can I say I love my job? I really do love my job. But the best thing about my job is I do have the opportunity to collaborate with a lot of school districts, and that actually is the best type of relationship we have here. And also joining me today is my colleagues from Department of Education, Juan Morales and Fred Yeager, and from the Division of State Architect, we have Sal Duda. Is that correct? Sorry, Sal. And then we have Barbara Kampminer. She's a deputy executive officer for our organization. And so the key thing is you'll have every state agency here that's also involved, well, at least from our end, for the funding process. And we'll talk about how you access the funds, but you also have to have a critical component of these agencies with some approvals on their side of the shop before you can actually access the funds for funding. Our mission is, again, to process grant applications on behalf of the State Allocation Board, and so those grants unilaterally get presented once they meet the eligibility criteria. And so that's a great thing. And we're actually, the kickoff is because we actually have an opportunity to restart the program again since Proposition 51 was approved by the voters in 2016. So it was $7 billion authorized, but now we are short of that because we actually did approve some program funds just recently. So with that, I wanted to cover the topics we have today. We have the master planning aspect of the education specifications, and that will be Department of Education, and the process requirements of each agency we'll share with you today. We'll also hit on the topics that were some recent changes in our program that were approved by the State Allocation Board in June. So we wanted to touch those topics because those are important topics for us. That's grant agreements, and then also talk about the application processing moving forward. And we also wanted to touch base on the career tech education funding round that just opened up. And so we wanted to discuss those opportunities for you as well. And our goal is to ensure that districts, if you are applying for funds, that you actually reach the goal line. And so maximize the most funding that you have the opportunity for. So again, our goal is to collaborate with you to ensure that you're successful in our program. So for a show of hands, I want to ask in the general audience, how many have applied for program funds before? Yay. Okay, well, how many are school districts for the first time? Oh, right on. Great, great. All right, with that, I'll go ahead and turn over the mic.
Good morning, everyone. Once again, my name is Juan Morales. I'm the Director of the School Facilities and Transportation Services Division at the Department of Ed. With me here today is also Fred Yeager, who is our Assistant Director. John Gordon will be with us this afternoon talking about CTE, and we also have Ms. Lisa Constancio in the audience, who is the field rep for the area. Thank you. It's great to be back here at DGS, to be working once again with Lisa and OPSC, with Chad and DSA, and to be able to be here to provide you information from each of the state agencies. We're going to start off by going through our mission. For those of you who are not familiar, we are under the leadership of the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tom Torlakson, and our mission, I'm not going to read it all, but basically that we will provide a world-class education to all students from an early education all the way through adulthood. What we're going to talk to you today is about the importance of school facilities. We're going to give you a high-level overview of the importance of a facility master plan, why it's important to have educational specifications, and then we're going to delve a little deeper into our standards that are part of Title V and our review process when it comes to plans and sites. Then at the end, we're going to provide you with some resources and contacts. So aside from our department's mission, our division has a vision as well for school facilities. And basically, we envision school facilities that enhance the achievement of all students, that are learner-centered, safe, sustainable incentives for the community. We have this in a fact sheet that we have available online, and we also have guiding principles that help us implement this vision. Once again, I'm not going to go through all of them in the interest of time, but there's a couple that we reference in terms of the importance of having a facilities master plan and educational specifications. So I want to go through why facilities matter. And some of you may have your own thoughts or may be aware, but for those of you that are not familiar, there's a growing body of research that demonstrates that the conditions of facilities have a direct impact on pupil achievement. Wanted to start off with sharing that information so that you all are aware that school facilities do matter, because these really are learning environments. And depending on the conditions, it will impact your students. There was a study done back in 2009. It was basically a compilation of summaries that reviewed this very topic. Again, the conditions and the impacts that it has on pupil achievement. Back then, the compilation was about 20 reports that reviewed this topic. And this was back in 2009. This was done by 21st Century School Fund, but again, that there is a lot of growing body of research. I wanted to highlight just two of them. One that was done in 2004. This study took a look at several schools in Los Angeles. They came up with an overall compliance rating, which is basically a health and safety compliance rating that took a look at 14 different areas, ranging from indoor air quality all the way through lead asbestos management. What they found when they took a look at the facilities in the worst condition versus the ones that were in the best, there was a difference of 36 points in the old API. Obviously, the ones with the better overall compliance rating scored the highest. So what they did is they were able to demonstrate that there is a direct impact between the pupil achievement and the conditions of the facilities. There was another study that was done in 2002 that also took a look at the environmental condition, and they found that having a good environmental condition could increase pupils' test scores from 5 to 17% than the ones that had bad conditions. And when we talk about the indoor quality, we're talking about acoustics, thermal comfort, noise, those kind of things that have a direct impact on the student achievement. Again, these are just two, and there's a lot more that we can cover, but I just want to give you just an idea that there are studies out there, and these are things that you can use to demonstrate to your community that, student facilities, these learning environments do have an impact on the pupil achievement. So how do we plan? How do we manage our facilities? Some of you may be aware, some of you may be involved in facilities master plans. Actually, show of hands, how many of you have worked on a facility master plan? Okay, quite a bit of you. Good, so this may be, for those of you that have, maybe a little redundant, but some school districts, especially the smaller ones, don't have them. And they're very important. Why? Because it helps you be able to plan, to be able to make wise investments in school facilities. We're talking about multi-million-dollar investments, right? Especially when it comes to capital outlay. So having a good plan will help you. So what's included in the facilities master plan? You have enrollment projections, you have current enrollment, prior year enrollment, and this will help you take a look at what you should expect in terms of students. How many students am I going to have? This is also a very good opportunity to partner with your community, not just from the parents, the educators, but also with folks from the local planning commission. Taking a look at what's going to be planned in terms of development. Are there planned development units for your area? And it's a good opportunity to start working with them to hopefully coordinate and be able to plan for schools. Wouldn't it be nice, wouldn't it be ideal to have a facilities master plan align with the city's general plan? I know that this is a lot easier said than done, but again, these are opportunities to start working with your folks at the local planning commission so that you can both work together to plan for schools. It also takes a look at existing conditions of the facilities. What do they look like? What do they need? Do they need to be replaced, a new roof? Do they need a new HVAC? What are the things that are needed to maximize the facilities? So it takes a look at not just the enrollment projections for growth, but also the existing conditions to see if you need to have facilities modernized. And then at the end, you can take a look at financing options. If we do have facility needs, it's going to cost money, and where we're going to get the money. And then once you have that, it helps you prioritize potential options to manage and invest in facilities. Again, once you have it all together, you can identify alternatives. And a lot of times, depending on the size of your school district, you may have a lot of facility needs. You may not be able to tackle all of them, but once you have it organized, you can be able to prioritize. And this is what you can use to take to your community. If you're planning to go out for a local bond, a lot of times the community wants to know, well, what you're asking for money, how do we know that this is the best investment? The facility master plan will help you because it prioritizes, again, and it shows the community that here's what we looked at, here's what we plan on having in terms of growth, here's the conditions of the facilities, and here's what we prioritize these projects. Now we need your support to help us pass a local bond. It also helps in case you have future attendance area changes. Again, you have the information in the plan, you have the schools, you have the locations. If you need to have attendance area changes, it's already there and it's easier to do. And the last part, it creates a process for continuous planning. Again, and this is to plan for your educational facilities. So you have it already available. It's easier to update and maintain. We could spend a whole day on all the components of facility master plan. We don't have that kind of time, but we do have resources available for you. And not just online, and these are part of your handout, but also we have folks on our staff that can help you. We can provide you technical assistance if you have questions in regards to the master plan. Next, we're going to talk about educational specifications. Again, another topic that we can spend a whole day talking about the importance and the components. But it's another area that we know some folks just see it as an additional report or documentation that needs to be done to get an approval or funding. But it's really much more than that. It's very important because this is really what you are using to align your policies, your priorities, your educational program. Here's what we want to do from the education side, and that is the information that you now share with your architect so they can design accordingly. Because once again, we want to design with purpose, and the purpose is to enhance the pupil achievement. So the program is very important to have up front, and then that's how you convey the information to your architect. We have an example here of different language that is included on a educational specification. And again, this information is what helps the architects design so that you can design with the educational program in mind. And the educational programs have changed, right? They've been changing over the years. There's a lot of things that we have now that we didn't have before in terms of project-based learning, maker spaces, outdoor learning environments. So we have a lot of new things that we have to consider. But again, the main focus is that you plan with your educational program in mind, and then you design the educational specifications specific to a particular school site to meet your specific needs. Once again, we have actually a publication that we did. We can take a long time to cover these areas. We don't have that time, but we have the information readily available on our website. And I can't stress enough the importance of contacting us early, and as Fred would say, early and often, and we can provide you more technical assistance. We have a relatively small unit, but collectively we have years of experience in these areas, and we can help you. So I mentioned the changes in the educational programs, the curriculum, some of the trends that are out there today. It doesn't just apply in designing new facilities. These are things that you can consider when you have just existing facilities. You may not have growth needs, but you maybe want to update, you want to modernize to align with some of the educational trends out there. This is an old design when you have classroom wings, you have a hallway. But if you wanted to consider other program changes, you can add maker spaces. You can consider adding them to available areas. Add a couple of areas where you can have, again, dedicated for just maker spaces and perhaps outdoor learning areas. Again, these aren't just for designing new schools. It's considerations that you can keep in mind for existing facilities as well. again, taking a look at what you have existing and then trying to update for the educational program. We have just a diagram with the old classroom design and a newer one with an open space. Again, that's just a very high-level overview on some of the things in terms of facility master plan ed specs. Now we're going to dive in deeper into the standards that we use to review plans and sites, and I'll have Fred go through those.
Okay. All right. Well, good morning. I'm going to talk about laws and regulations. So now's your chance to leave. So after you've done your facility master plan and your educational specifications, you know you need new facilities. So where do you put those? You might want to do additions. You may want to buy a new site. You may want to redo attendance areas. That's all the information you have with your community in the master plan. So what I'm going to talk about is if you want to build a new school, acquire a new property, modernize a school, do plans, sort of the framework that you would use to do that. So Education Code 17251 has been around for decades and says that Department of Education is to develop standards for the school districts to use in the selection of school sites and the design of plans. So it's important there, as a reminder, the districts select the projects and design the projects. The Department of Education, if asked, will review for compliance with Title V. But we do not do site selection ourselves or project designs. Right? So those standards are in Title V, and you can see the various sections in Title V: site standards, the plan standards, and then there's procedural standards, depending on whether you are asking for the state to review the plans, State Department of Education review the plans, or what is called locally funded, something that in which no state money is requested, so you are not required to come to CDE for review. You can see that Ed Code section, I think, whoops, that one. The bottom, 1770.50, which is in the school facility program law that says before the allocation board can apportion funds to a project, it has to be approved by CDE. But if you are using entirely local money, you do not have to have our review. We suggest you have us take a look at it. We have a lot of experience in looking at sites and plans and can give you some good ideas. But you are still required to follow Title V, even if locally funded. You're responsible for ensuring that there is a compliance with the standards in those two sections of 14010 and the procedural steps, CEQA public hearings. Right? Okay. So we're going to talk about the site approval process if you come to CDE. This is if you want an entirely new site or you're adding to property to a site you already have. So you've identified the need for a site. You're going to add on, buy a new one. The first step is to have your CDE field rep, Lisa, John, Rob, Bedelia, and Leslie, come out and take a look at the sites. It's good to have at least 3 sites to look at so you have a basis of comparison, understand the strengths and weaknesses of each site. We will then complete a review of those site options, and this is our initial site review, the Form 4.0, which is where we go and look at the site and based on what we can readily see, give you our opinion on the suitability of that site and the feasibility of continuing to do the research. Obviously, we can't look under the dirt to see if there's toxics, earthquakes. So this is a preliminary feasibility analysis to give you guidance as you go further in the process. So with that information that we provide you and your own research as to the conditions of the site, the location for your population, you follow all the standards in Title V and take that to your board, where your board at a public hearing will evaluate and approve that site for consistency with the Title V standards. Remember, this is regardless if there's any state money or not. A property to be used as a school site has to have that public hearing process that it documents the consistency with the standards. And that's Education Code 17211. Right? That's different than your CEQA compliance. The Education Code 17211 hearing is looking at the safety and suitability of the site. The CEQA is looking at about the impact of your project on the environment. So opposite. After your board adopts that, you send that package to us. We will review it for consistency and conformity and issue a letter that you can take to the allocation board staff. It's part of your funding application. Right? We have some resources that you can take a look at for guidance in what makes a good school site and outlining in greater detail the process. Some other sources for looking at school site potentials are your local planning agency. They're very familiar with property, its constraints, it's consistent with the general plan. District architect is a good resource. Sometimes a trained eye from the architect will tell you that this is going to be a very pricey site to develop because of slopes or that it's difficult to get access. So involving that architect early in that process is a good idea. Okay? So now these are a summary of some of the key factors in those Title V standards I talked about. Safety is number one. Okay? That includes things such as location near pipelines, power lines, heavily trafficked roads. Environment. Are there endangered species, wetlands, things to consider? Okay. Topography, difficult to develop, has a nice slope, can be pricey. Accessibility, can you get to it? Are there public streets? Or are you going to have to provide the access to it? Okay. Utilities, water, sewer, are those available? Availability, willing seller, eminent domain, adds cost and time. The location, is it near where your student population is or planned? Or is it a magnet school that will serve the entire community? Is it something that, as we see more urban infill, transit-oriented development, is it a project that is responding to a revitalization of the inner city? Is it near a transit center, perhaps, for students that the district is looking to have students use public transit in that way? Size and shape. Long and skinny makes a difficult site to lay out. Generally, square 3x5 is good shape. Public services, fire, police. Cost, always important. And public acceptance. Is this a site the public is behind? Some of the key documents that you'll submit to us. Department of Toxic Substances Control, required for only state-funded projects. And that's really the only difference in Title V between a locally funded project and a state-funded is the sign-off from the Department of Toxic Substance Control. Okay. Your geological hazard study, seismicity, flooding, DSA will also be looking at that. Your CEQA documents, typically in a site acquisition, it's a neg deck or an EIR. The Planning Commission report, you have to notify the Planning Commission of your city or county prior to acquiring the site so that they can opine on the consistency with the land use plan. And an aeronautics review within 2 nautical miles of a runway. That requires a review. It's not an outright denial, but it gives the opportunity for Caltrans Division Aeronautics to fly the site, look at the noise contours and the safety patterns, and advise us, is that a suitable place for a school? All right. Look at our list 4.01 for the complete list of all the required items, and call Lisa, Bedelia, Rob, John, and Leslie early and often. They've done this a lot, so they can help walk you through the steps. Okay. You can call me too. Contingent site approval, and this will a contingent site approval is the first of 2 steps to a final site approval in these 2 circumstances. A financial hardship, and we're going to hear more about that, and an environmental hardship. An environmental hardship is where DTSC has evaluated the site and has determined that it will take 6 or more months to remediate the site. So the contingent approval allows you to access that property early on so that you can take care of the cleanup. When you do that, you get final DTSC letter and your final CEQA document, we can convert that into a final. Okay. Now you have a site. So for plans, educational specifications, what are the guiding documents and thoughts for the plan? What is the architect responding to? Is this a magnet school, a STEAM school? What is the programming? What size? What's the population? We like to see plans very, very early in the process and have found out that the earlier we have the ability to give you our comments, the much easier it is for the district and the architect to respond to those changes. And that response can be a change in the plans, could be a further narrative as to why this is as it is. For example, why are the locations of the street penetrations where they are when it creates a conflict with students walking to school? Very difficult thing to move further into the design process. So the earlier we have that discussion with you, the better results we generally all get. Right? So we will then review your preliminary plans, typically design development 50%, give you our comments in writing. You take those, respond with an architectural change or a narrative saying this is why it is, this is how it all fits together. We will take that and then issue you a final letter that you take to OPSC for funding. Okay? So and this is the process for any type of plan approval, whether it's an entirely new school, an addition to a school, or a modernization. Things we look at include classroom size. Classrooms have to be at least 960. 960 is not the maximum. It's the at least. Okay? The ceiling is not the floor. Parking and drop-off areas. A lot of schools have 600 cars showing up within a half-hour period. Where do you put them all? Is your parking lot separating the buses, the kids, the pedestrians? Are they backing up onto the street? A common thing, especially during additions, you've added 5 classrooms. Do you have enough toilets? Do you need to now do a new lunch period, or is your cafeteria large enough to accommodate the 100 new kids? Is your parking lot big enough to handle the 20 new cars that will be showing up every morning? For science, things such as eye washes. And supervision. Are the orientation of the building suitable so that you can have clear lines of sight? Here are some more resources we have. Healthy Children Ready to Learn, designed for food service and physical education. Healthy and supportive school environments, a broad range of information on indoor air quality, other environmental factors. The bottom two, I mentioned those when we talked about sites. We do have protocols so that when you do your Title V analysis of a site, if you are within 1,500 feet of a pipeline, you have to do additional study. Doesn't mean the property can't be used as a school, you just have to do these additional steps. So we have a pipeline protocol that you can hire an engineer to use to assess the safety of the school site relative to the location and content of that pipeline. Okay? Juan mentioned these as the summaries of research, a number of documents we have posted over the years that are designed to be written for the layperson's approach, that can be useful in discussing with your board and community the value of school facilities, flexible learning environments, integrating schools and communities. There's a number of these on our webpage, so take a look at that. A number of districts have found them very useful in that community discussion. Kind of boils down to the basics in a very understandable way. United States EPA also has a number of resources on school siting, things to look at when you're planning the modernization of a school, radon, asbestos, all those good things. And some thoughts as to how to plan for doing work on a school that has students on it. How do you make sure they aren't exposed to vehicles, dust, noise? And then these are our assignments. And we have finished coloring. See our 5 folks there. And then for the career technical education, that's John's assignment. And Lisa handles the charter school facility program, the funding through the state allocation board for charter schools. Okay. And I think that is all we have. And there's our contacts. I think DSA is... Oh, why not?
Good morning. Let's see, make sure everybody can hear me. I'm Sal Duda with DSA. I'm one of the plan check supervisor for structural safety at DSA Sacramento office. Today we'll talk about basic DSA 101. Before I even start, just wanted to kind of summarize. Now you got the site selected. Now you have gone through the basic site information that meets the CEQA and other community requirements. After that, we come in bad guys, because everybody likes to point finger at us. It's all DSA's fault. But if you coordinate with us before everything is done, you can control your costs, you can control your challenges, and you can complete your project as you plan on completing. To do that, one of the things constantly we deal with is site selected, and either the architect or whoever designed professional wasn't really aware of DSA requirements, never dealt with DSA, or the site poses so many accessibility challenges. Means once a person comes to the public right of way to the campus, how he's going to get into each building, whether that's a new campus, whether it's existing building being altered. That means you're doing modernization, or you're doing addition, or you're buying a new building next to it. So accessibility has to be looked at, and the funds for the accessibility has to be requested to Department of Education or OPSC. This is how much money it's going to take to get somebody from the sidewalk to that building, and whether it's a parking lot, if it's a hilly site, how many ramps you need. And usually we expect up to 20% of the total funds allocated toward accessibility. And what happens? Those 20% funds are getting used for the building being built, and when they come to DSA saying, well, we can't do that, we need hardship, there's not enough money in it. Usually 20% we look at, if it's a $1 million project, $200,000 could be going for accessibility, and that's your job as a facility manager, is to informing the OPSC, this is how much funds we need for accessibility. And once the project goes over a certain threshold, which is I think a couple $100,000, and there's no limit. So when you select a site, make sure you have looked at accessibility, how you're going to get people into the building. Then comes the next one, how you're going to get them out of the building if there's a fire or if there's any kind of disaster. And that's our fire life safety. That usually does not pose many challenges, but if you're a small school district, your site does not have fire sprinklers, and you want to build a big building, guess what? You need fire sprinklers. You need a water tank. You need to figure out where you're going to put the water tank, what's capacity of water tank is required to feed the fire sprinklers. All those issues need to be decided. On top of that, a couple other things you need to be aware of. When you select a site, it's like I said, you do your hazard report. What's under the site, whether it's any kind of hazardous material. So that needs to be studied, and many times there's bad soils underneath. Liquefaction is one of them, or bad soil which is going to settle during normal course of building use, or there could be floods. And if there's a creek nearby or there's a dam nearby, you better go on the FEMA maps and see if this area is going to be under flood. You might have to raise your building pad by 10 feet. And so all those issues are the basic information we expect the facility planners and the architect to study before you go into the project development. And come talk to us when you're doing master planning, or if you're doing, you have a very difficult site, and what could be done, where would we grant you exception, where we would not. It's good to come attend a meeting with this architect or design professional at DSA so you understand where your project's going to be stopping. So just the basic, I wanted to get everybody's attention. We're not the bad people, but we have to make sure make sure building code is applied. It's like say minimum classroom size, we require the minimum code is applied. For the structural safety is the next. You got the people in the building, you got people out of the building, and there is enough fire separations for fire life safety. Now comes the largest, make sure the building is safe to be habited throughout its life. Our DSA existence came in 1933 after the Long Beach earthquake, where many schools had major damage. And at that time, there was no regulation, uniform regulation, how to build building and maintain. And that's when we came into the picture, make sure all the school buildings are designed by California Building Code. And having said that, so let's get started. So DSA organizational structures, and basically we'll talk about who we are, our roles and responsibilities, and how does the plan review process goes, how does the construction oversight, what's the responsibility during the construction oversight. After that, we want to close the project, certify it to make sure meet the minimum requirements, building construction requirements, and what resources do we have available, and we'll talk about all that. So organizational structure, our headquarters are in Sacramento, obviously 1102 Q Street, and we have 4 regional offices. One of the regional offices also on 1102 Q Street, and headquarters and regional office, we kind of share the same floor. And then one office in Oakland, another one Los Angeles and San Diego. Our regions divided into, as you can see, blue, green, white, and kind of yellowish. My colors are different here. Anyways, Sacramento office does this whole blue, all the counties in that area. And if you have project in other areas, then you just go to the same regional office. Different regional office responsible for that area. So we usually don't allow one office to go to another office. If you're doing Sacramento work, you can't go to Oakland. However, many times we have architects who are in Oakland and they want to go to Oakland office. We ask them to submit your project application to Sacramento, and we will collect the fee and have the Oakland office do the plan check if they're okay with that. So we make those exceptions depending on if you have that need. Roles and responsibilities. Basically, we have statewide programs that we want to make sure everything is uniform statewide, and we certified construction inspections, project inspectors, so make sure they have the minimum knowledge when they oversee a construction project, and we test them, certify them, and we provide training. We look at the testing laboratories. Part of the construction program is, materials need to be tested to make sure it complies with the building code requirements, and we want to make sure the testing facilities or laboratories are certified by DSA. They have the minimum knowledge, they have the right tools, the right equipment to test the materials. And we just don't want any laboratory that has a couple testing machines to start testing, or if they have the knowledge how to look at the soil sample, how to look at concrete, how to look at anything that need to be tested or providing. Sometimes they provide special inspections. And we also work on code development. As you said, our educational need is changing every year, we keep changing how we want to be in open door, we want to be indoor, we want to have flexible classroom spaces and whatnot. Our codes are not up to date, and we have to deal with some of those challenges when the architect goes, I'm going to open all these doors and make a one space for education. Guess what? It becomes assembly area from code point of view. Now the different code requirements come in, and we constantly have to deal with those issues, and we work with the code. We write the code for the future code, building codes, to make sure we incorporate that. We have to develop policies and procedures. Meanwhile, the code is not there, and then we have what we call a regulation interpretations, which are called IR. We have many of them. You can go to a website. There are IRs for administrative portion, structural portion, fire life safety access portions. Those are the interim regulation interpretations because we don't have the code addressing that. And if we don't have IR, because we are not there yet, we issue bulletins. And a lot of bulletins are issued to take care of the challenges that we may have while IR or codes are not developed. So those are our headquarter programs. Then regional levels, what we do is we mostly 90% of work is plan review and approval. That's all we do. We're the worker bees. Then we do the construction oversight when the project is approved, gone to construction. And then we also approve the construction inspectors, whoever is going to oversee that construction. And then at the end, we certify the project meets the minimum requirements. Okay, we look at schools. Schools not the only responsibility we have. 90% are schools. We also look at essential services buildings state has, which is state transportation management system, state owned or leased facilities for the essential services, CHP offices, fire, CAL FIRE offices. Those are part of the essential services. And then we also do accessibility review for state buildings, such as California State University systems and UC systems and other state buildings. So those are access-only review we do. We do not do construction oversight or certification of that. That's left to the design professional to make sure it gets done right. And we just only look at the plans to make sure they have minimum requirements for the accessibility to the building being altered. So what kind of projects require DSA review? New construction, obviously, any addition, alterations, relocation of temporary modular buildings, reconstruction if their building's been damaged by fire or flood or water, storms and whatnot, tree fell on you, so you got to reconstruct. Sometimes most of the buildings are reconstructed back to what it was. Many times, once building is damaged more than 50%, then the facility planners wants to make different changes to it. So, and then the last one is rehabilitation. You have a building that doesn't comply with the current codes, or whether you're buying a building that never was built with DSA approval, now you want to add it to your school inventory, whether it's on campus or next to campus or somewhere else where you want to teach children. And then we have to figure out how can we make that building comply with the current code, not the code the building was built under. Now it's coming to DSA. When it comes to DSA, that year is the code. Whatever's effective, that's what needs to comply with. What we do allow a lot of exceptions, and is basically covered in ASC 41, which is building code for rehabilitation. And if you hire a structural engineer to rehabilitate, make sure he understands that code. Just don't hire any structural engineer who doesn't understand, then you're going to be in trouble. And we also look at the miscellaneous other structures like light poles. If you have a cell tower or light pole for the stadium over 35 feet, or you have retaining wall at the sites, or you want to put a sign structure at the campus which is more taller than 8 feet, ball walls, and many others. So if you are uncertain whether you need a permit for it, you can go to our website. IR A-22 is a good place to get started, and that have a list of projects that are exempt. And then also IR A-10 is another place where do you need to go to DSA? Do I need approval from DSA? We allow alterations and reconstruction up to $100,000 worth of project without coming to DSA. However, that does not exempt you from not doing the construction compliance with the building code. You still have to comply with the building code. You also still have to inspect it. But we will not oversee construction. You're on your own, so that means design professionals taking full responsibility for the work up to $100,000, and even goes more than $240,000, I believe. If there's no structural work involved, then you can go even more than that, provided there's no accessibility or fire life safety issues exist. And if you're uncertain, call regional office DSA. We will glad to help you. Yeah, $225,000 is the exempt if there's no structural work, no accessibility work. And okay, we operate under Ed Code 17280 and Statute 81-130, and that's government code. I'm not going to go through that. So there's a regulations, Title 24, which we operate under. Admin code is the one that gives a direction what we can review or cannot review, what is going to be the permit cost and whatnot. And Part 2, building code, we make mostly our jurisdiction is structural safety, accessibility, and fire life safety. We do not go into detail into electrical, mechanical. What we do, look at the fire alarm when it relates to fire life safety. And so we expect the design professionals to be fully knowledgeable and competent to do electrical, mechanical, and when they stamp the plans, including plumbing. Energy, we do require energy paperwork we submitted, but we don't do detailed review of that either. Again, our responsibility design are basically structural safety, fire life safety, and accessibility, energy, and model water efficiency landscape ordinance. That's a new one that's added on. We do not review it, but we have a form that's filled out. Is basically if you're putting a new building in, you have over 1,600 square foot of lawn area that you're impacting. You can save that in your district. How should I say it? We allow each district to keep their bank so they can. One school may have to do you have to do water efficiency when you have additional lawn area, so you can save water for the water efficiency landscape ordinance, and so you can use in and out of that bank to make sure that you comply with the efficiency landscape ordinance. I don't know, I'm not going to go more detail into it. It's a small program. So, but again, all the projects submitted need to be complete for civil, electrical, mechanical, all the disciplines, not just disciplines we review. We like to see the full set of plans that are going to go to construction, and the contractor is going to bid on it and start the construction. Plan review process. So highly recommended is you come in when you have a project, when you have challenges at the site, and you want to discuss how do I get the accessibility here, what am I going to be required to do even before you go to funding, so you can understand what the challenges are. Or if you're altering a building, make sure you may need to seismically separate two building addition and existing building, or if you're going to, a lot of times, if one of the things greatly missed is if the project cost is 50% or more for the building being altered. That means if the building, if you can replace the building for $1 million and $500,000 is more than $500,000 your project cost, we want you to bring the building up to the current code. You just cannot do alterations. So for those reasons, or if you're adding a mass to a building, you're adding weight on the top, you exceed 10%, we want the building to be upgraded to the current code. So those issues need to be evaluated up front, so you make sure your project does not die at the end, or you end up spending a lot of money. And try to come to DSA as early as possible. We usually bring all the disciplines into the meeting, and we encourage school district or the owner to attend that meeting, because then design professional can't just point at us saying, well, DSA made us do that. It might be their fault that they didn't look into everything. So we encourage you to come in, just sit there, just so you can see the process, what we are asking them to do, so then you be more informed. And then that saves time overall. Then our design professional understand what the issues are at the site, and they can take appropriate action to fix those issues before projects are submitted. DSA is always helping, well, at least we're trying, helping to get your project approved, and we want to make sure the least amount of time is spent at DSA. So we started a new appointment process system recently in, I think, end of July 31st. Basically what it is, in the past, we had it 6 weeks bin time. I'm pretty sure everybody heard of bin time. Basically, it means project came to DSA, we looked at the project and say, yep, it's complete to be able to be reviewed, but it sat in a bin up to 6 weeks, or in a box, in a cubbyhole somewhere, till plan reviewer is available to review that project. And those 6 weeks were wasted because sometimes that 6 became 8 or 10, depending on when we have people available. It's like, I'm sure some of you have heard the advertisement from Dignity Health saying, okay, if you want to come to ER, make appointment and sit at your home and come in when your time is up. This is kind of same system. Your project, you tell us you're going to bring a project in, this is your project, there's your detail, there's your cost of the project, and we ask you to, within a week, upload the preliminary drawings showing what your project look like, and we say, okay, before you're going to come to DSA, 6 to 8 weeks before, make appointment. You can keep working on the project, but when your appointment time comes up, you better not be late. If you're late, you're back in the line again for 6 weeks. Or you make sure you have all the information that you need to submit a project. If you have a missing information, we may allow you a day or two to get it. More than that, you're back in the line for 6 weeks again. The reason for that is, as a plan check supervisor, I have people who are going to be able to work on it. I have to line them up when your project is coming. In the past, it was sitting in a bin. When project person became available, he grabbed the project from the bin and started working. Now you're going to bring the project today. I got 4 days to get somebody working on it. And if that project isn't ready, I got to find another project for him. Now you got to go back in the line till somebody else is available for you. So we're helping. At the same time, we want to make sure you take the full responsibility to make sure project is complete when you come to DSA. If you know your project's going to be late, let's say you make appointment today, 4 weeks later, go, oops, we won't be able to submit as we appointment schedule. You call us and submit another form. We're form capital of the world probably, but you submit another form saying, okay, here's the revised date, but the date you're requesting can only be 6 weeks from the date you're requesting. So if you're requesting today, 6 more weeks. So if 2 weeks into the 6 weeks period, you decided you need more time. When do you need more time? You use 6 weeks from that. It just keep moving 6 weeks. So I encourage you to be proactive, Don't make any changes. As you make changes, architects are going to say, nope, I can't submit it. It's not complete anymore. Guess what? 6 more weeks. So you want to, if you have a schedule, stick with the schedule. Don't make those changes in that 6 weeks period so he can finish up if there are finishing touches left. So I'm going to spend more time on that. Basically, when you submit it, you want to we require 3 complete sets, 1 for each discipline, and they all make their comments and return back to you. And then we need, again, geohazard report. We want to know what's underneath the soil, whether the ground can support the building you're planning to put on, or if the earthquake's going to make the building lose its support during earthquake. So then structural calculation if there's building. And then also we want to make sure the local fire authority has looked at your building, whether alteration or whatever is being proposed, so they can get to it. Just like accessibility from public, want to make sure the fire department is okay to get to that building to fight the fire. Otherwise, we approve the project and it goes, wait a minute, there's no accessibility from fire department here. You're making us go through student drop-off area, which if the students are being dropped off, I cannot park my truck and open it up and be able to fight the fire. So those are things we want the fire department to look at to give the approval. Do understand some of the fire departments held you hostage for giving that approval. You have to work with them. And then path of travel, again, I'm not going to say more. The path of travel is very important. Make sure how students can get to the building or get to the work area that's being proposed. Then that's the energy compliance documentation. DSA 1 is our form application for building check. And then DSA 3 is a submittal checklist. So we want to make sure you go through the checklist and check out things that applies to your building, and before you say, I have a complete submittal. And the fee is obviously, we need money. And there's, and we've already gone through some of that. We notify by email when we receive the application, when the review is going to start. And you can go to our website and look at when projects has started and as the progress is up, so you kind of know when a project's going to be complete. We have anticipated a completion date. We try to maintain all our commitments. When district comes in or architects comes in with a tight scheduled project, they ask us, can you commit to return this project by a certain date, because they have a tight schedule, they need to open the school by a certain date or classroom. We will commit to those dates if you came in early enough, gone through the process, we took the big bugs out of your project submittal, and then we will commit to those dates. A plan review will be returned on that date that we agreed to or before. However, if it's no commitment, we have anticipated date on our website, but things do happen. Sometimes we have a priority. Construction is our first priority. If project's in construction, if we need to take care of something in construction, we take care of them first. Second is back check. If the project's already gone through the plan review and the client wants to do the back check so they can go to construction, we ask the plan checkers to take care of them before plan review. So plan review becomes a third responsibility. So the anticipated completion date once in a while will move by a week or so, depending on what the plan checker had to do to take care of that. Usually we have a little cushion area when we set the date in. When you go to our website, say when the project's going to be done, unless there's a committed date, that's the date you probably will see your project back. And we basically do all concurrent reviews. Structural takes the longest time. Fire life safety access is the shortest time. So if your fire life safety and accessibility review hasn't started but structural has, they know and they will try to catch up. And if sometimes they get start late but they get done early, you still got the fire life safety and accessibility review back. Structural may still take longer. That's usually the longest. If I have to guess, if you were going to submit, I would say plan 1 week for each $1 million worth of work plus 2 weeks. So $1 million or less project be 3 weeks with the new system, and start adding million to each $1 million you're submitting. The 2 weeks we're at, because 1 week is for the intake and cleanup or making sure everything is submitted, is complete submittal. The last week is post-review, mailing, whatnot. So 3 weeks minimum, 4 weeks probably more reasonable. And then if you have $20 million projects, so 20 million plus 2 weeks is not unreasonable. But if you come in, ask for commitment, we may send the project out to consultants. Some school districts or architects don't like that because they're not, they pick, I guess, a lot more than we do. But then also we can add multiple plan reviewers to make our commitments. But all that needs to be discussed, so I can't stress more. Come early, discuss with us, we're there to help you. So there's you can go to our website, and there's a tracker, project tracking system. You can go there and you can check the status of your project. And the architects usually we look at as the design professional responsible in charge, who will coordinate with their team and send their revisions, get everything and submit it back to us. Then architect will contact us to schedule a back check. If you're not familiar, back check is once we make our comments, projects, we want face-to-face review of their comments, and something that was not responded or the architect wants to discuss, we make those changes right at the spot. End of the back check meeting, your project is approved. So unless there's missing information that was not provided, sometime back check, can go all the way out, then wait for the missing information. One of the biggest missing piece of information is certification of existing building. If you're altering a building, you're modernizing a building, you better make sure that building is certified, close certified. If it's not close certified, then the next thing you need to do is look at what is missing. Go to our website under Project Certification Guide, Chapter 5, and it lists things that could be waived because they're missing. Is a piece of paper that's missing, or work was done according to code required construction. However, if there's a deficiency, the building that was built, there was a deficiency, whether the ramp wasn't correctly done or there was a change order that was not approved, and the building project is uncertified. That need to be corrected. Many times we can tie the construction deficiency item to the new project, but the paperwork needs to be complete. So at the end of a new construction project, including the old deficiency that need to be corrected, once it's corrected, we don't want to call you. We want the fees to be paid up front. All the paperwork related issue need to be taken care, whether the inspector died, doesn't have final verified report, but there's enough evidence that work was done. Some cases we have a form that we put down, and the district has to sign off on the form saying we certify, or under the penalty of perjury, this person is no longer alive or is unable to give us or not cooperating, whatever the consequences are, that we need to have this information waived. Under project certification, you can look at the things that could be waived. Most of the time, things that can be waived are paperwork related. Testing was done, report never came in. Okay, unless there was a clear evidence, compelling evidence that work is deficient, we're gonna accept as work completed per specifications. So a lot of times, our field engineers would be in the field, write a report saying ID tags are missing on a building. We don't know if it's the same building that was built for this site. No, that's a deficiency. That needs to be corrected. You need to put a new tag on or get the correct tag for the building. Or if they say ramp is missing or different ramp is put in that was designed for, that's a deficiency. that need to be corrected. If they say, let me say, for example, fire alarm was tested, but installed, tested, but there's missing report. We can ask you to provide evidence that fire department been testing that fire alarm, and we will accept it NFPA 13 form saying, okay, that's acceptable. So there's many things we will accept that's done correctly, many things that needs to be corrected under new application. So that's big item, delays your project. So when you start a project, look at all the building you're touching. Are they certified? If they're not, get on the phone with me or whoever regional office is and get the dialogue going. We can pull the existing file out of our archives, see what's missing, and give you guidance what you need to do. So in the back check, basically you bring all the amended drawings, we go through it, and we approve the project, assuming there's nothing left over to do. At the end of the back check, you'll see DSA ID stamp, identification stamp on the plans, and it tells you who basically your initial, then the date, and that's the date your project is approved. This is not approval stamp. This is identification stamp. Approval comes as a letter to the school district saying your project dated, stamped, dated so and so is approved. So that is your approval letter. Once it's approved, it used to take longer because we had to scan the drawings, keep it in our system. In the past, we gave you the project back and saying, okay, go get approval set printed, send us one. Some of them never showed up. So we have some of the projects uncertified because you guys never sent our approved set. Because we stamp originals. So now we start scanning it in-house. That start getting delays again. So now we put the burden back on a district or the architect. You pick a firm, whoever's going to do the scanning, once project's approved, they call them in advance that project's going to be approved today. They come in, pick up those drawings, scan them into this, make a digital copy, and bring them back to DSA, and then you can pick up your drawings, and then you have an electronic copy of all your projects. So then the original drawings are released to the architect. If you're adding a building or rehabilitating a building or building that does not comply with the current code or is not approved, there are many projects that are on campuses that were put in, many buildings that were put in, the district never got approval for it. So now we look at those buildings as coming into our DSA system as of whenever the application is applied. So we need to rehab that building to make sure it meets the code. That's when it comes to DSA. To do that, there's a procedures and guidelines available on our website, and many times district would come and say, okay, we're going to gut the building out and we're going to put new walls, new finishing, new carpet, new ceiling, everything. We're just keeping the shell. You still have to get rehabilitation report approved. So there's a guideline on our website for rehabilitation of building, and they have to write a report. The structural engineer or architect need to write a report. What are they going to keep? Not what they're going to take out. What they're going to keep, and how does whatever is kept meets the current code. If it doesn't meet the current code, how they plan on retrofitting so it meets the current code before they can do that. So when you bring your project in for approval, we already have agreed on design guidelines. What are we going to check? So that way your project cost doesn't go at the end when we go, oh, you got to do this, this, and this, and say, well, we didn't think so. This was built to the code. So that's why you need a rehab report, design criteria report submitted to DSA ahead of submitting your project. A lot of School districts don't know it. When they submit the project, then they find out, oh, we didn't agree to what we're going to do. So good idea to, if you're going to rehab a building, we do charge money for it. There's $2,000 retainer fee. We charge $215 per hour fee for every engineering time. If we don't use up all the money, we refund the money. And if we find when the report's submitted, if it looks like it's going to take us 50 hours to review it, we'll ask for more money up front before we finish the report. So that's something you need to be kept in mind. And then we have PCs building, pre-check buildings. And usually modular companies who do the pre-check buildings pay fee up front, hourly fee to us to get those projects checked. So when district has a need to move a relocatable building to the site, we don't check that building for structural, for any of the disciplines. The only thing we look at, how does that building, whatever is in it, complies with the site accessibility, fire, life safety, and structural requirement, or if there's any foundation requirement. So the pre-check bill, we spend a lot of time approving pre-check building for the manufacturers who pay a fee up front to check those buildings so they can reuse them, go over the counter, which is the fastest process. You make appointment and bring your project same day, get it approved, and you're ready to do the construction. So basically, we review all the site conditions related to over-the-counter. And then the next phase is the construction oversight. When 1933 Act was put together, Field Act was put together, field oversight was not part of the requirement. Then they learned all the projects are getting approved, compliant with the code, but nobody's building to the code they were approved at. That's when we initiated field oversight. During the field oversight, we do not do inspections. We certify inspectors who you're going to hire to do the inspection. What we do is we make sure the inspector is competent enough to oversee the construction that's being proposed. Number 2, he's certified. Number 3, he is there when we go there. So we do surprise visits to him. If he's not there and there is something going on being constructed, he's not there, we write him up, and we sometimes tell the school district, get him out of the site. He's never there when critical construction work is being done. But school district does hire the inspector, but they want to make sure when you hire them, they're certified by DSA. They have certification, and we have inspector 1 through 4 classifications, 1 being the highest and 4 being mostly for the site work or relocatable building installations. And you can go to our website. IR explains to you what each inspector's classification responsibilities are. And same thing with the laboratories. That's going to do material testing, whether it's a soil, whether it's a concrete, whether it's steel, whether it's any proprietary product being used. They need to be certified by DSA. District hires the laboratory. We don't get involved with their contracts. We just want to make sure whoever they hire is certified by us. And then we also review the inspector qualifications. When inspectors propose, not only we look at if he's qualified, we also look at how many other projects he has that he's busy with, so is he going to be able to devote his time looking at the projects being proposed. And then a lot of times we have multiple inspectors on a project. If you have a new campus, $100 million campus being built, you might have 3 or 4 inspectors. But there will be lead inspector, everyone else will be assistant to that inspector, even though those inspectors are certified. The assistant need to be certified as well. So during construction, we have field engineers who periodically visit the site, and field engineer responsibles are making sure the inspector is competent, he follows the code, he understands the code, what needs to be done, and there is what we call project manual specification. Does he follow the project manual specifications, how it's being built? That's our responsibility. We test them, we rate them as we go to the site. You can look at all the rating, inspector rating at the site, that how do we rate him, whether he has the knowledge to do whatever he's looking at. And if we find he's not competent enough to oversee certain construction activities, we will inform the district, and district will get a copy of field engineer's report saying it's deficient. And we also keep the architects informed, and that is our new approach that we did not have before. We have a construction, form that needs to be completed as the construction inspections being completed. We didn't have that before, building inspection form, and that's why a lot of our previous DSA projects are not certified, because we don't know what the inspector did. There's no records. Now we're keeping the records, so we're making sure no additional new buildings are being added to our inventory. We had over 16,000 projects that were not certified statewide when we started. We're down to 7,000 now. And as those projects are getting into being altered or changed, that's why we are holding a hard line. We need to get it certified, get it out of our system, because legislators have required us to do something to get this backlog out, and that's our way of saying we will not approve your project unless it's certified. So do everything to get it certified. So inspection card, that's part of the inspector's responsibility. Make sure he completes them as the project is completed. He writes semi-monthly reports telling architect, school district, and us what's happening at the job site. Now, the inspector has a really tough job. If you think about it, architects direct his work and what he can inspect, how he should inspect, and we supervise his work. So we're their supervisor. Architects direct their work and is paid by district. So he has to please 3 people. And poor guy always under stress, because if he inspects too much, district might kick him out. If he doesn't inspect too much, architect might kick him out. And if he's not doing his work, or district had agreed with 200 hours and he needs to spend 300 hours, now we may be saying, you're not there all the time. We're going to kick him out. So he has to please 3 entities. So he's in a tough situation. So so when you see inspector writing reports, he has to please. If he doesn't do competent work, we will not certify him again. So now he doesn't have a job. So you can make the decision, how to deal with the situation. And then after construction's done, we start getting all the evaluated. Okay, we already gone through. Then the architect's responsibilities, we already gone through some of the. Then there's addendas, change orders. Architects needs to work on and submit it to DSA before construction takes place. A lot of times, work is already done. Then we see the addenda, or when we see the change order, and then we have to do damage control. Then we're fighting. So it's a good idea. Architects need to be proactive, getting all the addendas, change order. We don't review change orders anymore. We review change documents. We used to review a change order with the dollar amount. We don't do that anymore. Now we strictly into what technical work is being changed, and we just want to approve that. And at the end of the project, final verified report is prepared by each design professional, including inspector, those are the key to DSA, telling us under the penalty of perjury, we certify the projects built to the approved plans and approved construction documents. And that's done by structural engineer if there's one, architect if there's one, mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, construction inspector, and if there is any in-plant work, they need to do it, and then the testing laboratory needs to prepare a final verified report that they tested all the materials to the design specifications. If there were special inspectors, such as welding inspector, he certified all the work is done according to the welding criteria. And if there is a concrete testing, no, not concrete, if there is soils inspector, that geotech needs to give the final verified report. So all those need to be submitted to DSA to close the project. Then we say, everybody have certified that the work was done according to approved plans and specifications. Now we can say the project meets the minimum requirements for building construction. Before you can occupy, just want to stress now more, DSA does not have authority to allow occupancy of a building. School board does. So a lot of small school districts, school board members do not even understand they're taking personal responsibility for letting a building sometimes my words are not best on Monday. So letting a school occupy a building that is not certified. They take the personal responsibility. We do not have that authority. So if something goes wrong, fire alarm doesn't work, something falls apart, we will not be able to say this building was constructed per design specification. So school districts need to be aware of when they are putting children in uncertified building. I'm not going to say anything more. Everybody should consult their lawyers if they're going to be a part of school board. The rest of we already gone through in maybe a different order. Hiring LE approved labs, certifications. And when it comes to certification, again, based on approved plans, then building code requirements, letter of certification is issued to the school district saying it meets the project design specifications and details and the code. Now, at the end, if it doesn't, what happened? We used to have a 90-day letter. We will give you a 90-day letter saying you got 90 days to complete missing documents. We don't do that anymore as part of the new guidelines. So we say project either in construction or occupied without certification or certified. Those are three things. If your construction's ongoing and you decide to occupy the project, we're going to send a letter saying it's occupied without certification. Certifications triggered when building is in use, occupied or otherwise complete. Okay, after 60 days, when construction is complete, 60 days, DSA 301N. N indirectly stands for notification to school district that project is complete. Start getting all the certification documents into DSA. And after 60 days, if you haven't gotten all the documents to DSA, we issue 301P. P indirectly stands for public documents. So we put it on a website. So if any public member wants to look at if the building is certified, they see that 301P, which tells them what are the issues, why the building was not certified. And it's external documents, and district is responsible to making sure they get their projects certified. And now comes to resources. And we have many resources just like everybody else. Website is one of them. And you can contact us, our staff, they're all on the website. And we have a lot of forms and publications. Sometimes I get a call, just say what publication and form I need to read to look at this portion of work. So we have bulletins, guidelines, policies, procedures, all on our website. Their form, as I said, we're probably the form capital of the world, but we have to have a uniform policy for the whole state, so we try to do the best we can do. And then interpretation of regulations, IRs, is our mostly widely used information guidelines. So go there if you're looking to put a freezer unit or a refrigerator box inside the building. What do I need to do? Okay, or if I'm going to replace hood or fire suppression system. So all of them is there. Again, there's project tracking information. You can go to our website under tracker, and then you can check if the project is certified, not certified, if the construction is school construction inspectors, if you're looking for inspector in your area, there's all sort of good information available on site. And DSA box, when your project's in construction or active, now it starts from the day you submit the application for a project. We have DSA box where you become part of the collaborators, so anytime any information is added to the box, you get notified. Whether architect sends something or inspector sends something, before it used to be a black hole, and did you get it or not? Now it's there and you can view it. So nobody can say, oh, we didn't get it. That piece of information in the box, everybody who's in the project collaborator list, whether it's a school district or architect or structural engineer or DSA or plan reviewer or laboratory inspector, they all are able to view it. They may not have rights to upload anything, but they're able to view it. Then they can say, if somebody says DSA, we didn't get it, and you can just show the box and say, I can see it there, how come you can't see it? So the project documents are kept at one place. And there's emails if you need assistance. And we are on Facebook, on Twitter. I'm not, but thank you.
I think we're about ready to come back to the presentation. So thank you guys for sticking with us. I know this is a lot of information today, but we're going to move into the funding piece. I'm Barbara Kampminer. I'm Deputy Executive Officer of the Office of Public School Construction. And now we're going to talk to you a little bit about how to apply for funding and some of the basics of the program. So for some familiar faces here, this might be a refresher, but we're going to go into that, and then just to kind of let you know what's coming after that. So after the funding piece, we're going to talk about the Career Technical Education Facilities Program. So CDE and OPSC will be sharing that information with you about the upcoming filing round. And then we're going to break for lunch so that those watching the webcast can have a nice stopping point there. But after lunch, please feel free to come back, because that's when we want to open it up to specific district questions. If you guys brought some questions with you today, after lunch, that's when we're going to kind of open it up. All the state agencies will still be here, and then you can talk to us about your specific questions. So that's kind of the plan for the next few hours. So with that, I'm going to move into the funding process, and what I know you've heard this from a couple of the agencies, but I also want to reiterate that the planning and early conversations with OPSC, we also highly encourage those. You don't have to wait until you have your other state agency approvals to come talk to us about what that means from a funding perspective. In fact, we'd love for you to talk to us early so that you don't end up with surprises at the end, and you've designed for one thing and you're about ready to put the shovel in the ground and you find out that the funding model isn't anywhere close to what you were expecting. So we'd love to have those conversations with you, or the conversations where I don't really know where this fits in the grand scheme of the school facility program, so can you help me figure out if there's any funding available? And we would enjoy those exploratory conversations as well. So please give us a call. As Fred said, call early, call often. We share the same philosophy on that. So with that, we are excited to show the next chart, because we haven't had a chart that looks like this in a few years. But with the passage of Prop 51, we now have bond authority for the program, which is nice because we were pretty much exhausted in the new construction and modernization areas for a number of years. But we have about 6.7 billion right now. Prop 51 put $3 billion into the program in new construction, $3 billion in modernization, and another $500 million each in career technical education and the charter school facility program as well. So that is great news. So with that, we'll talk about new construction first. It's one of the main programs that we have under the school facility program. And new construction, the purpose of it is to add capacity. So basically, you're adding classrooms to meet future student housing needs. And the new construction funding can cover the costs for an entirely new site. It can cover the costs for adding additional classrooms to an existing site. And then, in addition, the funding model is designed to provide those classrooms and then funding that also takes care of things like core facilities, multipurpose rooms, libraries, gyms, admin, etc. How does this funding model work? Well, this is very high level, but it is the basics of new construction eligibility. So you can see we've got our classroom here. We've got our smiling, happy kids. It's the first day of school. They're all really excited to be back. Using the state loading standard, what you're going to do to determine if you have new construction eligibility is look at your existing classroom capacity, and then you look to the future. At our most basic model, you're going to look at your enrollment, your projected enrollment in 5 years, and if you have more kids than you have classrooms, those kids that don't fit in your classrooms represent your new construction eligibility. So in our example here, this is one classroom, it's 712 classrooms, so we loaded at 27 pupils. And then in 5 years, there's 6 kids that aren't going to fit within that loading standard, so you'd have 6 pupils worth of eligibility. Eligibility is updated for new construction on an annual basis unless you are a small school district, which are districts with less than 2,501 pupils. Those districts may lock the eligibility for up to 3 years, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that in a few minutes. For new construction, you're looking at a 50-50 state and local matching share partnership. So 50% of the funding is provided from the state in the form of a grant, and then 50% is matched by the district with local funds. And we do fund on a per pupil grant amount. So you saw those 6 kids that were needing or representing your new construction eligibility on the last slide. So what you do is you take the number of pupils that you're going to build for, and you're going to multiply them by this base grant amount. Now this is adjusted every year in January when it's based on the construction cost index changes. So in January you can look to see what the new grant amounts are going to be. But this grant does provide funding for the design, the construction, the actual construction of the building, the testing, furniture and equipment, et cetera. This is not the only grant that you can qualify for. There are supplemental grants depending on the circumstances of the project. There are supplemental grants to get the site ready for construction, so site development, your grading, your site prep, the utilities. There are also different grants available for site acquisition costs so that you can actually buy the land if you're acquiring a new site or if you're adding on to an existing site. And then depending on the project, you may qualify for other supplemental grants. For example, if you're on an impacted site and you're doing multi-level construction, you may qualify for things like a multi-level construction grant. If it's a small project, there's some add-on grants there. So when you're looking at your construction funding, it's more than just the base grant on these pupils. It's going to be project-specific, what you qualify for. And if you're interested in kind of running those calculations, we have a calculator on our website, but we'd also be happy to help you with the rough numbers on that. One thing I do want to highlight, the application for new construction, it does need to be submitted before you occupy the facility. So if you are ready to start school or ready to occupy some facilities that you've been working on and you have not submitted your funding application to our office, you want to make sure you do that before you actually occupy, because once you occupy, it makes that project ineligible for state funding. So please keep that date in mind. The other main program is the modernization program. Now, this is a little bit different. You're not adding capacity here. What you're doing with modernization grants is you're extending the useful life of the existing facilities, or you're enhancing the physical environment of a school. The modernization funds can be used for current projects that you're starting right now, or they also can reimburse a completed project as long as the contracts were after 1998. The funding for this can also be used if you're in a situation where the building is just not in good enough shape to actually modernize it. You can also demolish the building and replace it with facilities of like kind. That would be considered a modernization project because you're not adding any capacity. The funding model is, the eligibility model is a little bit different. It is site-specific, so we're looking at the facilities on the site and the enrollment of the site. Now, when you're looking at the facilities, you want to make sure that you're keeping in mind that permanent buildings are at least 25 years old and portable buildings are at least 20 years old. Now, this calculation can be based on classrooms or square footage, and the form that you're going to complete to do this gives you an option to do both. Sometimes it's helpful to actually complete both sections and not just stop once you've counted your classrooms. In certain schools where the age of the buildings for some of your core facilities is older, that can help you on a square footage basis. So we always advise folks to take a look at it both ways to make sure that you're getting the most modernization eligibility you can for that particular site. And then unlike new construction eligibility, you don't need to adjust this every year. Once this has been established, you can update if it's going to increase your modernization eligibility, but you don't need to update if your enrollment changes and you have fewer kids. So you can be working off of older eligibility, or if you've had additional facilities that came of age, you might want to take a look and see if you want to supplement that and see if your modernization eligibility is a little bit higher. Also, if you have buildings that are 50 years old, that have not been modernized before, these buildings often have additional costs. There is a different grant amount for these buildings. So it's helpful when you're establishing eligibility or when you're looking at that to know the dates of those buildings, not just whether or not they're over 25 years, but the actual age of the buildings so that you can figure out if it qualifies for that higher grant amount of the 50-year-old buildings. And with that, you also have the option to do some 50-year-old building utility costs as well. The funding split's a little bit different for modernization. It's 60% grant, 40% local matching share. It is still funded on a per pupil grant amount, although the grant amounts are a little bit different. But these also change each year with the construction cost index changes as well. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about the project life cycle and how you apply for funding. But before we get into this detailed chart, we wanted to talk about a few things that have changed recently since the program has started back up. So for the most part, the chart that you see back here, that is the process, with the exception of new construction applications and how we're going to be establishing eligibility. So I'm actually going to skip ahead here. So when the program started back up, there were some changes, and we wanted to let you know kind of what to expect, what's going to be different, what's the same, and how is this going to work? So basically, in June, and actually a little bit before June, the State Allocation Board was having a lot of conversations about how they wanted to start up the program again. So prior to this, we had, in 2012, basically the program was running out of bond authority. So the State Allocation Board said, you know, we're not sure where this program is going. We don't know if the rules are going to be the same. We don't want to be locked in to a huge list of projects until we know what's happening with the program. So regulations were passed that created a new project status. It created a new list, basically. Districts were able to submit applications to the Office of Public School Construction, but aside from kind of flipping through the project just to make sure you had all the basic documents there, OPSC was not to review these projects to determine if they met the criteria, if the funding requested was something that the district was eligible, et cetera. So we have not reviewed those projects. Now, that means that we have about a little over $2.5 billion worth of projects that were in that situation. They were waiting for OPSC or for bond authority before OPSC could start processing them. There was also a batch of projects that came in after the State Allocation Board had made the decision to start the regulations, but before the regulations went into effect. And just to touch on that briefly, because some of you may have had projects, those were projects on the unfunded list, often referred to as the true unfunded list. So those projects were fully processed by our office, and they were waiting for bond authority to become available before something could happen with that project. So with the board's decision in June, bond authority was available for those projects. They moved to the unfunded list, lack of AB 55 loans, which means they had bond authority available to them, but no cash. And then with the recent bond sale just a few weeks ago, those projects had cash assigned to them and were able to receive apportionments. So if you are a district that had a project on the true unfunded list, then right now the stage you're at is that you're getting ready to submit your request for the cash, your fund release authorization to us. So that was a somewhat limited universe. So for many of the rest of you, you might be on this acknowledged list. Again, the acknowledged list applications were not processed. So what the board said in June was, okay, so the true unfunded list is going forward. Those projects will get apportionments, no changes there. But for the acknowledged list, the board was concerned with new construction and providing new bond dollars to projects that may or may not be necessary. So this is where the biggest change comes in the processing. The applications that we're processing for new construction, the date was kept. All the projects are still in-house, and we're going to be working our way through that list. But when we're updating or when we're processing your project for new construction funding, we're going to need you to update your eligibility. And you're going to update your eligibility based on the year in which OPSC is processing it. So right now, if we're processing your application, we're looking at the 16-17 enrollment year to base your new construction eligibility for purposes of the enrollment projection. Now, how are you going to know what year to use? How are you going to know when we're going to need that information? Well, we want to give you some notice on that because it can take a few minutes to put that together. And we don't want to, give you 15 days to do this when you're right in the midst of something else that's equally important at school. So we are planning to notify you approximately 60 days in advance of when we will be processing your funding application. And in that 60 days, you will be gathering your information for your enrollment projections and updating that information for us. Now, if the updated eligibility results in fewer available pupil grants than you originally had, we have some options. In new construction eligibility, there are ways that you can take a look at that projection. So you may want to look at the current year eligibility and maybe not just do a 5-year projection, maybe look at a 10-year projection, or maybe make sure you're augmenting for dwelling units and new houses that are being built. The model that I showed you a few minutes ago was just the basic level of new construction, but there may be ways that you can update your eligibility that will account for what you think is actually happening in your district. But if all else fails and that eligibility number is lower than what you were expecting at the time that you submitted the application, and you've perhaps already even built the project, then you can submit an appeal to the State Allocation Board. It's through our normal appeals process. So you're going to use Form SAB 189, which basically you're just telling your story. You're explaining to the board what happened and why you think the board should take a particular action. And then we'll process that request to the board. So when the board was deciding that new construction eligibility needed to be updated, they did want to make it known that this process was available. So that brings us to the small school district lock. So what about districts that are considered small school districts that have the ability to lock the eligibility for 3 years? So we still want to honor the intent of that statute. So what we can do is we will process eligibility for new construction for small school districts each year that you choose to submit it, beginning with the 16-17 enrollment year. So what a small school district can do is submit in 16-17. That would lock it for 3 years after the board approval. If in 17-18 that goes up and you want to lock a higher amount, that's fine. We'll process that eligibility update as well. 18-19, same thing. So basically, we are going to process the eligibility so that small school districts can lock, and then we will process your funding application at a future date, and hopefully it will fall within that lock period. And if you are, say, 2 years out and we're processing the application, you will not need to update again as long as you're within that lock period. So not much change for modernization applications. As I mentioned earlier, we don't process eligibility down, so you don't have to update for eligibility purposes. But one thing to note in both cases for new construction or modernization applications, if you have plan approvals from DSA or CDE and you have not started construction or gotten under contract and those approvals are going to expire or they've already expired, before we can take you for an apportionment, you have to have current approvals. It's statutory. It's not something that anyone can waive. So make sure that you are getting those approvals updated, and it may take more than the 60 days notice that we're giving you on the application processing, so you want to kind of look into those timelines and make sure that you're getting out ahead of that. Another program that we have under the school facility program is the facility hardship program, and it is designed for health and safety programs. Now, at the back there, we had a handout that has a lot of lovely pictures of things you probably never want to see in your facilities. We've got a couple up here. But if you do find these things, don't panic. We may have some funding available for you. The funding in this program is intended to provide the minimum to mitigate the health and safety issue for the staff and students. So it's the minimum work necessary. Now, eligibility is going to be a little bit different in this program. It's not based on your new construction or your modernization eligibility. First, you have to qualify for the program. So you either have to have facilities that are in need of repair due to an existing health and safety threat, not a potential health and safety threat, but an existing one. Or you may be in a situation where you've lost facilities due to a fire or a flood, something like that. So if you have a circumstance like that, then what you're going to do is you're going to contact an industry specialist. Now, this specialist is going to be different depending on the type of situation that you have. You're going to be talking to a different specialist if you're looking at mold versus a structural issue. But you're going to get a report from them that says that there is a health and safety threat to the students or staff, and it's going to outline the minimum work necessary to mitigate the issue. You're then going to take that report and you're going to get concurrence from a governmental entity that would have oversight in that area. OPSC doesn't have the technical expertise to tell you whether or not this is a health and safety threat. We're going to rely on the documents that you get from your industry specialist and from the other governmental entity. So once you have that, you can submit an application to us. And again, you don't need new construction or modernization eligibility, but one thing to keep in mind is that you do need to be able to justify the enrollment at the site that you have the health and safety threat, because you still need to justify the need for the facilities. So if your enrollment has gone down, that may have an impact on how much funding is available. Just kind of depends on what's going on at that particular site. The funding is provided in two ways. It's either provided as replacement or as rehabilitation funding. And what you're going to do as part of your application is do a cost-benefit analysis. We have a calculation to determine what the state considers the replacement cost of the facility. And you're going to do a detailed cost estimate for the rehabilitation work. Now, if the rehabilitation cost estimate is more than 50% of the replacement cost, that's going to put you into replacement territory. And then you can replace the facility. That comes out of the new construction funding, and it is an option. Now, if it is less than 50% of the replacement cost, that puts you into rehabilitation. So you would be applying to rehabilitate that facility. There are 3 different types of projects, just depends on the circumstance. Again, it's possible to replace an entire school if the location of the site or the conditions at the site are such that even rebuilding on that site is not going to solve the health and safety issue. We can replace individual buildings or facilities on the site, or again, you could simply rehabilitate those facilities. Depending on what type of funding you receive, that determines the matching share basis. If it's replacement, it comes out of that new construction, so it is a 50-50 matching basis. And if it's rehabilitation, it's 60-40. State share is 60%, the local match is 40%. Just going to touch real briefly on the charter school program because we are in the midst of a filing round for this. So some of you may have been approached by charter schools that are participating. Some of you may have submitted applications on behalf of a charter school within your district. But there was $500 million available from Proposition 51. We received a total of over $2.5 billion in requests for that $500 million, so we are oversubscribed. OPSC is processing those applications right now, and the program basically is designed to allow for new construction funding or rehabilitation funding of facilities for charter school purposes. So as districts, you may be working with us or with the charter school right now to update your enrollment information to determine the number of students that will be housed by the charter school project, or they may be working with you on rehabilitation agreements if you provided district facilities 15 years of age for the charter school to use for this program. So that might be the connection there. So we're working through those, and we do expect preliminary apportionments to be made in early 2018. With that, I'm going to turn it over to John to talk about our financial hardship program.
Good morning. John Leininger. I'm the supervisor of the financial hardship review team. And just out of curiosity, how many people have been through a financial hardship application or processing? Not many, because we haven't done any for about 4.5, almost 5 years, other than for facility hardship. So this is going to be a very brief overview. If you want additional information, we do have some handouts. There's some frequently asked questions out there, plus some of our checklists. And then later on, as Barbara indicated, we'll be available for any questions you might have on an individual basis. So, financial hardship. Basic purpose is to assist districts and county offices of education that cannot provide their own matching share. So for an example, if you look at the bottom on the left-hand side, you have a new construction project with total funding of $1 million, non-financial hardship. So the state puts up $500,000, district puts up $500,000. Same project, but it's financial hardship. The state share is still $500,000. The district is able to put up $100,000 for their matching share, so the state does a financial hardship share of $400,000. So the financial hardship share can be anywhere from $0 to $500,000 depending on the district share. And the way we get to that, we have two phases to the process to determine eligibility. And I'm going to try and be a little careful with the words here. For phase one, what we're trying to determine is the district eligible for consideration for financial hardship? When we get to phase two, we then start to take a look at some information and we try to decide how much can the district provide so we can determine what the financial hardship piece is. So to be eligible for consideration, overall, the district must be levying the maximum developer fee justified under law and meet one of the following criteria. First, you can have long-term debt that is 60% or more of your debt capacity, and that's typically general obligation bonds or COPs, certificates of participation. Or you can have had a successful voter bond election within the past 2 years. And again, I emphasize the word successful, within the past 2 years. You can be a COE, a County Office of Education. Or you can have total bonding capacity of $5 million or less. Now, if you don't meet one of those 4 criteria when we do the review, we would send a notification that says you're not eligible for consideration. The district then has the option to file an appeal, a Form 189, and they are able to present any other evidence of reasonable effort approved by the State Allocation Board. Again, as Barbara indicated earlier on the appeal process, this is your opportunity to present your case to the State Allocation Board, and they can determine whether or not you are eligible. Once you've gotten past that first step, and by the way, very early in the process, if you're not sure whether you're eligible and you're not sure whether you want to invest the time and effort of applying, if you'll give us a call, we'll do a very informal assessment. We call it kind of a light switch test. It's a yes, no. Not formal, but it gives you some idea of whether or not you want to proceed. But once we get to phase two, what we're doing is reviewing to determine the amount of funds available for district match in what we call the district facility funds. For those of you that aren't accountants, that's funds 21 through 50. What we do is we take a look at the revenues and expenditures for up to the past 3 years. The reason for the up to is our beginning point for this is your last annual audited report. And then the next piece is from that date forward up to a date we call an as-of date, because this is what we're really doing is we're putting a stake on the ground on a given day and saying, how much cash do you have available? It's kind of like when you're getting toward the end of the month and seeing if you can make it to the next paycheck, you have that stake in the ground. How much do I have available? One of the things we do focus on is transfers into or out of the facility funds, because again, those are funds designed for facility use, and we're kind of curious if monies are moving in or out, why that's occurring. We may on occasion look at some special reserve funds. For example, Fund Fund 40 is normally called a reserve for other capital outlay. But again, we want to look at that and see if some of those funds could be determined available. And then the final thing we do is we reduce available funds by encumbrances. Again, this morning I looked at my checkbook and I said, hey, I have $500. But then I remembered I have a check I have to write this week for an obligation for $300, so I really only have $2. So that's kind of hopefully a simple explanation of the encumbrances. Normally, encumbrances will be for things like coming payments that are due if you have general obligation bonds or COPs out there. Now, once we're done that review, we will send a findings letter. And attached to that letter will be each of your fund worksheets. And what we're basically doing is telling you, as a result of our review, we've determined that you have a certain amount of money available for your project. You get to review that. If you don't agree with it, then you call us and we try and resolve the differences. But if you do agree with it, you sign it, and the attached forms, you send them back to us. At that point, we issue an approval letter. And you're done and you're ready. So again, if the available funds are less than the district match, the state will fund the difference. Also, for financial hardship districts, as was mentioned earlier from CDE, financial hardship districts may request site and/or design funding prior to requesting full funding. So it's a good thing to know. And again, at the end of the project, if you're financial hardship, you can run into an occasion where you didn't spend all the funds that you had for the project, you have savings. Now, at that point, you have two options. You can retain the savings for up to 3 years to be applied to a future financial hardship project as contribution, or you can repay it to the state. And it works this way. Let's say that you have $100,000 in savings. You come in within the next 3 years for a future project where your share is $500,000. We're going to say you've already contributed $100,000, then you're down to maximum of $400,000 available. And financial hardship approvals are valid for 6 months. After that, another review must be completed. So, we saw a potential problem, and as Barbara mentioned earlier, we made some changes. So at the June 28th SAB meeting this year, the board approved an amendment to streamline this process. Before, you had to have financial hardship requested and approved before you could submit the application, and that approval was good for 6 months. Now what we're doing is you submit the funding application, you check the box, it's the SAB form 5004, you check the box that indicates that you want financial hardship. What we're going to do then is wait until about 90 days prior to starting the funding application processing. That gives you about 60 days to get us the required or requested information off those 2 checklists I mentioned earlier, so that we can do the review, so that when they're ready to go to the board for funding, we know how much is district share and how much is financial hardship. And one of the reasons we're doing it this way is if you came in concurrently like you can, the concern was if we do a financial hardship review, it's only good for 6 months and we're not able to get you to the board because we don't have the cash available, then we're going to have to do it again. So we're trying to avoid that. And I think it says somewhere you have to have a chart or a picture occasionally to break up the monotony, so here it is. At the top is the old process, and again, as you can see, you would submit a request for financial hardship, we would process it, you'd get an approval letter, then you had 180 days to submit your application, and we would process it. Now on the bottom, which is more important, again, on the left, you have the application is currently on the workload list. And you, being patient folks, wait for us to send you a letter that says, we're getting ready to process your application. So we're going to ask you for the documentation we need to do the financial hardship review. So we're going to be processing that review at the same time we're doing the funding application. And again, once we've done the review and you have the approval letter, we have 180 days. If we don't get you funded or on the unfunded list by that point in time, then we're going to have to do it again. So unless there are any other questions, one final offer, and you've heard it from everyone else. Call us early, call us often. Okay, so we can kind of make sure that you're headed on the right track and that things are workable. Believe me, when you call me, I don't see it as a burden or an imposition. It's my job security.
Yeah, we have a great team there that's always willing to help. So, we have people still alive here, breathing. Grant agreements. So, with the action of Prop 51, the bond being approved, there's also some grant agreement that the board, State Allocation Board, adopted recently. And the grant agreement is also in effect as of last week. As John mentioned too, the hardship changes to that program was also into effect as of last week as well. So the purpose of the grant agreement was really trying to provide a very clear guidance for folks that are coming into the program. And they receive the funds, and then, what are the guidelines? What are allowable expenditures and what are clearly not allowable expenditures? So we worked together with some stakeholders. We have several stakeholder meetings and with a lot of input, even input from our board members. So the board adopted the grant agreement, and we actually made some conforming changes to the budget language that was also approved later on in late June. So again, we have this document. It's the reference document that was approved by the board. It's 100 pages long. You will not receive 100 pages from us. But it's really laying out the criteria for the funding that you're applying for. So if you're an applicant and you're receiving funds for career tech education, then you'll get a grant agreement that also tailors to the rules for career tech education. So, and if you're modernization, you received a modernization grant, you'll also receive a grant agreement that tailors to the grant that you're receiving. So we also have this document on our website, and each of the programs have different rules. So this is a clear guideline of what rules you need to follow and what are the expectations, not only from the expectations you have, but also the expectation from the agencies as well. So what are the requirements even from us to follow up? So good information. I would say that probably the genesis of the document is the main conditions are probably about 12 to 13 pages, general conditions, but then specifically to the program, you might have an additional 5 to 7 pages. So it applies to any project receiving regardless of any bond funds. Again, we have a reference document on our website. And that's just posted recently. So who has to sign a grant agreement? Any projects that was placed on the list or workload list, unfunded list, that the board approved after June 5th. There were projects that actually were approved prior or on June 5th. They're not subject to a grant agreement. And so those are projects that came in and the board approved back in 2012-13, and we didn't have bond authority. So after a lot of discussion, the board said, let's not have the grant agreements apply to these folks because they've been waiting for quite some time. And those projects were approved in accordance to the rules at the time. So those projects didn't have a grant agreement. And they were also allowed computer allowance or technology allowances. But moving forward, what you'll see if projects approved after that date, they won't have the allowances for some technology. But if you have technology built in your project as part of your modernization or your new construction scope, yes, those types of things will be allowed. But it was really the focus was computers in itself, printers, and so having a mortgage to pay 30 years, there was lots of conversations about whether or not those allowances should be part of the program. So specifically after June 5th, they're not allowances in the program. So how do I get a grant agreement and when do I sign one? So when you're actually, the board actually approves your grant, and we are processing those grants as of August. Those projects actually did receive, will receive a grant agreement. So you'll get a notification from us that your grant has been approved, and then we'll send you a courtesy grant agreement. And so the grant agreement will give specifications to the project, the amount of funding you receive, the due dates and timelines. When we actually go out and sell a bond, and then we'll activate your project, meaning that you'll have a real live apportionment. So when you have that and we take action on that, and you're trying to activate your cash, you need to submit the Form 5005 to us, but you also have to submit the grant agreement. No grant agreement, no cash. So the grant agreement is, we have a grant agreement page on our website, and again, we have it specifically broken by sectors. But one thing you need to know also about the grant agreement, we have a list of eligible and ineligible expenditures, and if you see something on that list and you're going through your program and you're thinking, well, I don't see something on my list, so how do I get feedback? I mean, what's the mechanism? So the board, the allocation board we had a really robust conversation about that. We're asking you to formally send us a written request clarifying whether or not a certain expenditure would be allowed underneath the program rules. If it's not on there, then how do you know it's going to be eligible? So it's project specific. You submit that information to us, specifically what details, what type of expenditure is it, and then we'll provide you written advice. That written advice is important to you, and it's also important to the local auditors as well. And so we'll post that written advice on our website, and it's project specific. So if I had a district in Elk Grove, they submitted project specific seeking advice on a project, but then I had a district in Napa, and they said, hey, look, there's an advice letter I saw that looks just like what I need. No, it's project specific. So we are asking that if you have questions, then you want clarification, then we'll provide you an advice letter as well. Now, if there's a reoccurring theme, we actually will take an item back to the board to amend the grant agreement. So it's not just locked in stone. What's changed? A local audit. So any projects approved prior to June 5th will be subject still to our closeout process. We have a team in-house that will still do a compliance review. But projects approved after that date will have to go through a local audit. So the $370 million that I mentioned earlier, the projects that were approved, they actually are subject to a local audit, but they won't have a grant agreement attached to them. So there's going to be some audit guidelines they're going to be posting, I would expect sometime early spring. And so it's going to go through the process of what guidelines do my local auditors will follow when it comes to the projects that were approved during that time frame. So moving forward, any contacts from our office will be related to those projects approved after that June 5th date. And projects prior to that, again, we'll be doing our own reviews. So what would the local auditors be looking for? So your grant agreement is a good resource for you. So again, it's really laying out the requirements for the program. The grant agreement is going to be a template that the audit work group, or it's going to be a separate work group that's going to be comprised of Fiscal Crisis Management Assistant Team, Department of Education, Controller's Office, and the Department of Finance, and independent auditors. They'll convene a group of meetings, and they'll start crafting some of the audit requirements and push that through regulations. But a lot of that information is going to come from the grant agreement. So stay focused on what you have if you receive a grant agreement. So those are the things that they're going to focus on moving forward. And so when those guidelines are published, we'll post those to our website, and we'll also send you a notification of what those guidelines are. So moving forward, if you have any questions related to that, we're here to provide resource and outreach opportunities for you. So if you need clarification, then we'd be happy to do that. So what happens if there is an audit finding that was determined by your local auditor? Moving forward, those those appeals will be handled by the Education Audit Appeals Panel. So no longer will be handled by the State Allocation Board. Projects approved, as I mentioned, prior to that June 5th date, those will still be handled by State Allocation Board in our office. But if you're trying to seek clarification and you're not really sure what to do, please call our office. But again, when your local auditors, again, if you're disagreeing with some of the findings, then you have the ability to get that adjudicated through that process. One thing, too, I want to mention is if the local audit determined that you have, you're eligible for a site increase, then we'll actually process those items back to the State Allocation Board. So we'll be tracking those audits that we received as well and making those adjustments accordingly. So you might be the benefactor of having a grant increase. So it's not always the negative. There's also the reflection that it could be a positive increase back to you because you're eligible to more expenses. With that, there's our point of contacts for our office. And we would like to, if you guys aren't enrolled or signed up for our webcast or subscription here, we share a lot of information about future workshops and changes to our program. And we send out quite a bit email blasts. So we want to communicate with you regular. And so how you get this updated information is to sign up to our subscription list. With that, I will turn it over to the folks for the CTE.
I gotta look official here. How are we doing? Hanging in there, plowing through. Just another manic Monday. Well, my name is John Gordon. I am a field rep for the Department of Education. I serve the Central Valley, parts of the East Bay. I'm here to talk about the CTE facilities program. Oops. Okay, so what button do I push? Technical difficulties. So here we are. So as you know, Prop 51 passed, which brought $500 million to the coffers for school construction, and there's recently been announced $125 million for a new funding cycle. Through CDE, this is a two-step process, and it is a competitive grant process. So you don't need eligibility through OPSC. In fact, your eligibility is CDE reviewing your CTE program and evaluating it and giving you a score. So essentially, you would submit an application to the Department of Education. We'll review it. We'll score it. That score you would take to the Office of Public School Construction, and they would determine your apportionment, whether you will receiving funding and in what order. So the applications have been recently on our website, and you can go and get there to receive that application. They are due by the 29th, and we hope to have the scores out by the 14th. So what is career technical education? How many of us are familiar? How many of us have a CTE program, first of all? And that, I would say most of you. How many of us have received funding under Proposition 1D for the CTE facilities program? 1, 2, 3. So it's a handful. So CTE is, as you most know, it's about developing knowledge and skills in a particular industry sector. And so hopefully really strong CTE programs are going to lead your students either directly into the workforce, or it's going to lead them into higher education, trade schools, community colleges, and the like. Department of Education recognizes 15 industry sectors. And then recently we have adopted revised curriculum standards. So let me talk a little bit about the program itself. Under Education Code 17078.72, and that has not changed since 2006 when 1D was passed. But essentially, we will match your CT project dollar for dollar up to $3 million on a new construction, up to $1.5 million on for modernization. Your equipment that you're looking to purchase for your program must meet a 10-year lifespan. Each application that you would submit for request for funding must address one industry sector. It has to be very specific to that industry sector. So in some cases, what we've seen districts that say they want to have construct a large building that may house an auto shop, a wood shop, maybe some welding bays. That would actually require the district to submit 3 separate applications, one for transportation, one for product development and manufacturing, and then one for building trades and construction. You must have a minimum score of 105 to qualify to be considered for CTE funding. As I mentioned, it is a competitive grant process. We have $125 million. It could be likely that we are oversubscribed. So let me talk a little bit about what this application looks like. We have 8 parts to it. You want to write to your CTE plan. So tell us a little bit about what your program is about. Tell us about your coursework. Tell us about who is staffing if you have a credentialed CTE teacher. Pupil enrollment projection. So what we're looking here is how many students do you have enrolled in your CTE program? As a result of this project, how many students will you be enrolling in your program? Feeder schools. So tell us about your relationships. Tell us about the middle schools that are coming up. Tell us about your industry partners. Tell us about your community college partnerships and other types of partnerships. Your accountability plan is really addressing where are your students going to go and how can you ensure and what type of data will you have to support that they'll be going to where they need to go. The EdSpec is really talking about outlining what your facility needs are and your equipment needs, and really having a good understanding and really articulating a strong planning process. So in this case, what are the considerations that you would need to ensure that your facility is industry standard? And do you have your partners at the table to really understand what your facility should look like, as well as what your equipment needs are? Budget justification is giving us a line item. There are points given to unique conditions. In some cases, say for instance, if you have a rural school and you have some challenges with your CT partners, but you're able to make it work via long distance, that could be a unique condition. It's really up to you how you would want to talk to that. And then there's some points given to the overall feasibility of the application. That's based on the reviewers scoring and looking at the application in totem. So the asterisk parts of it are weighted items. So they're listed under Education Code 17078.72. And so those will typically be used during a tiebreaker to help figure out the funding order for this program. So you might be asking yourself, this kind of looking familiar, and maybe asking yourself, there really isn't any changes for 1D. And so, more or less, there aren't. This is a program, this is the 4th funding cycle, which means that we're continuing on based on what we see on the Education Code. There's been minimum changes to the regulations. There have been some in which Tracy, OPSC, will be talking about. We have, though, rethought our application, considering that it's over 10 years old, and the landscape of education, landscape of CTE has changed. We have really streamlined it. As a result, there are fewer points, but what I can tell you is that there are more points given actually to the facilities piece of it. And so with that, part of the change with the application is that we, at the Department of Ed, we really value the 11 elements of high quality CTE programs. And so with that, I have my colleague Michelle McIntosh from the Department of Ed. She's my CTE counterpart. And she could probably talk a little bit about that and what it looks like and how that impacts the application. Michelle?
Sure. Thank you, John. Good afternoon. My name is Michelle McIntosh. I'm with the California Department of Education, specifically the CTE Leadership and Instructional Support Office. So what we're looking for is we're looking at the 11 elements of a high-quality CTE program and what those 11 elements will look like within your application. So when we're doing that, specifically, if you look at and you're familiar with the 11 elements for CTE, you'll look at things like high-quality curriculum and instruction. So we're going to be looking at is your curriculum, is it aligned to our 15 industry sectors and one of the 58 pathways that we have. I know that was something that was already spoken to here, but again, student support and student leadership development, all of these pieces, skilled faculty and professional development, you're being asked to build facilities and you're being asked to provide equipment and so forth. So what's that equipment going to look like? What's the professional development plan for teachers to be able to use that new equipment and so forth within those facilities? And really overall, what's the major outcome? What are you going to be able to do now with these facilities and with these new buildings that you were not able to do before that's going to improve the instructional program, the instructional quality for career technical education and improve the instruction for your students? So that's the key here. So with that, anything else?
Well, we'll wrap our part of it up to say that tomorrow we will be doing a webinar which will have a deeper dive into our application and into the 8 parts. You can go to the Department of Education website. Probably the easiest way to find it is to go to the search box, type in CTE FP, CTE Facilities Program. Click it, you'll go right to the page, and on the page we should have our application. We're in the process of putting together and uploading some FAQs, and we also have our curriculum standards, and we'll have obviously information on the webinar. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague from OPSC, Tracy Sharp.
Hello, everyone. I will try to make this quick because I know we're into afternoon. I thought I was going to be saying good morning, but it's afternoon now. So I will move right along. So just a quick overview. Once you have passed through the grant application process with Department of Education, you're going to submit an application for the funding piece of your project to the Office of Public School Construction. That form is the application for CTE funding form SAB 5010. That is on our website. Feel free to take a look now, see what you're going to need in February. Once those scores are released, John mentioned the scores plan to be released February 14th. Our application due date is close of business February 21st. Fortunately, this is not a big, long application. It's fairly short, but get familiar with it now. See what you need. One of the handouts we have out front is a documents required list. So I encourage you, if you're interested in the Career Tech program, pick up one of those documents required lists so that you know what you're going to need when you submit your application, what needs to come with it. It's also available on our website on the CTE program page. So if you miss the copy or lose it, it's on our website. As John mentioned, there's $125 million dedicated to this funding cycle, not posted here, but something that we are planning for, and the dates are not solid yet, is another funding round next fall, in fall of 2018. It was part of the what the State Allocation Board approved. So we're doing some planning ahead. Just need to establish those dates of when applications will be due. So that'll be about a year from now. Another round with $125 million dedicated to it. Okay, so Purpose of the program, as John mentioned, it's for local education agencies and joint powers authorities. This program is a little bit different. When the statute was passed, it includes JPAs. And the funding can be used for construction of new facilities and modernizing existing facilities, as well as the purchase of equipment. As mentioned, I think earlier today, your funding request could be just for equipment for an existing program. That's okay. So you have two options when submitting your application for funding. It could be as you are construction ready, you have your plan approvals, your plans are approved by DSA, your plans have been reviewed by the Department of Education, and you have those ready to go on February 21st when you submit your SAB Form 5010. And that's a request for full funding. If you're not there yet, if you are still in the planning stages, you may request what's called a reservation of funds. And there's a checkbox on the form for a reservation of funds. That means you can have a bit more time. We'll process your application for funding, and after the board gives it an apportionment, you'll have an additional 12 months to get those CDE and DSA plan approvals done. Or if your project could be, as I mentioned, equipment only. So here's just a little graphic to show that process. All applications are going to CDE first for the review of your program, to get a score, to come to us, and then it takes two paths. If you're construction ready, you get your board approval, and through the priority funding process, you'll get an apportionment, and then on to fund release. If you're a reservation of funds, you'll get your apportionment, you'll have that 12 months, and you don't have to take the whole 12 months. It's whenever you're ready to turn in your plans and specs that are all approved with your CDE and DSA plan approval letters. We'll check it, verify that it's the project that we approved initially and reviewed, and then you can move on to fund release. So eligible applicants, kind of already mentioned this a little bit, basically an LEA operating a comprehensive high school and that has an active career technical advisory committee. Modernization, once again, an LEA operating a comprehensive high school, and then JPAs can apply for modernization only, and must also have an active career technical advisory committee. And once again, I think this was mentioned earlier, SFP eligibility is not required, so you're not going to be drawing on your new construction eligibility or your modernization eligibility by requesting career tech funds for your project. And the project grants. So for new construction, $3 million is your maximum grant. Your modernization maximum grant is $1.5 million. Grants are allocated per project. You can have, as John mentioned, multiple projects on a single site. Your project is defined by where it's at, the high school where it's located, your industry sector and the pathways under that sector, and the scope. As John mentioned, if you have a single building that's got multiple industry sectors in it, each industry sector is a separate application, and how much of that building is dedicated to the auto program, or how much is dedicated to the product development, the welding program. You're going to define that for us in your various applications. Then as we're reviewing them, there is a funding order. How do we decide who gets funded? The school facility program regulations are set up such that projects are funded in order of score and locale. So if you think about it this way, everybody is going to have a score, but there was a desire that there's equitable funding across the state for this. So we use the National Center for Education Statistics to help us define your project location. Is it an urban locale, a suburban locale, or a rural locale? And so we're going to fund each one of those locales, the highest ranking project in each locale, one of each, and then go to the next one. So it kind of goes in a round of 3. If all the projects in, say, the rural locale are funded, then we're down to 2. But that's the order of how projects will get funded, is the highest scores first in each locale and continue that process. And then just a little bit of information about the matching share requirement. This is a 50-50 program, so basically for modernization and new construction, no difference. It's all dollar for dollar. Your applicant share can come from any source, private industry groups, school districts, COE, or the Joint Powers Authority. And I'd like to add an exception here that's not listed on the slide. The board approved some amendments to the school facility program regulations in August that basically doesn't allow you to use other state program grants for other CTE program grant funds as your match. And I don't have the specific names listed on those, but they will be part of the school facility program regulations when they go through the administrative procedure, or the OAL approval process. Sorry, I'm mixing up my acronyms here. And in addition, for the Career Tech program, there's no financial hardship component. However, if you don't have your matching funds available, you can ask for a loan for your matching share of the project. And it's on a 10-year repayment plan that begins the loan interest accrual, and that 10-year time frame starts when you get a fund release. We have information about that, the worksheets that you would apply for, on our website as well. I promised it would be short. So if you would like to contact me, my contact information is up there, as well as our program manager, Brian Lepask, his contact information. And then future workshop dates. And Barbara, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Just real briefly, if you do have folks that would be interested in attending workshops in the future, we are in Santa Rosa this week. That's the next closest one. And then up north, and then hopefully out with other workshops in the future as well. But with that, this concludes the webcast portion of our workshop today, and we want to thank everybody that was watching. That will be archived on our website. If you had questions from the webcast, the contact info is in the presentations, and we have posted those to the website as well. So please send us an email, give us a call if there's something that you still have a lingering question on. For the rest of us, we're going to go ahead and break for lunch. It's a little before 1 o'clock. Let's go ahead and be back here at 2 o'clock. And the state agencies will be here to do a round of FAQs. If you have any questions for us about the program in general or about your specific circumstances, we will be available for both. There is a cafeteria within our building if you're looking to get out for some fresh air. The other state building, just a few-minute walk away, has a cafeteria as well. Or you're up to your own devices for lunch. But please be back here at 2 o'clock if you have questions. Thank you.